care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the Oshow. It's the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow.
Welcome to the Oshow, Canada's current affairs show with strong opinions. I'm your host, Laura Babcock, and on this episode of the pod, we have a real treat for you. A very opinionated, globally recognized urbanist who has a vision for cities, has worked in 350 of them around the world, ran for the mayor of Toronto, and is trying to make our world a better place. Of course, I'm talking about Gil Penalosa. He'll be our guest on the pod in just a minute. Some other things that we're following, of course, is more scandal happening in Ford's, Ontario. It really is exhausting. Our scandal panel had huge views and listens from all over the place, and we thank you for that. If you haven't already subscribed to the Oshow on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, please do it, because I have a feeling we're going to have our Oshow scandal panel back fast. There's so much to keep up with. We're going to have Merritt Stiles, the leader of the official opposition at Queen's Park, here on the pod to talk to us about what her party is doing to try to hold Doug Ford accountable with all of these investigations and reviews that are being done. While Queen's Park is going to be on its long summer holiday, we are not taking that kind of a break here on the Oshow. There's too much going on, too many seniors languishing in hallways, trying to get into long-term cares, too many ERs closing, too much scandal, too much money being wasted on deals for Ontario Place and for Staples and God knows what else. So we're going to stay on it here on the Oshow. You can count on that. Okay, let's get to our guest. He has, as I said, the solutions and a very strong opinion about what political leadership needs to do when it comes to urban planning. Welcome to the Oshow, Gil Penalosa. As I mentioned, he's worked in 350 cities, just got back from a big tour. It sounds like around the world, but I think that's natural for Gil. And he is here joining us to talk about his vision for cities and how he's giving back. And Gil, the first time that I met you, I interviewed you as part of a panel years ago before the pandemic. And I was struck at the time by your 880 vision for communities. And since then, you've of course run for the mayor of Toronto. This last election, you decided to step down and let Olivia Chow win. And I want to pick up with you both on your vision for cities, and I'll get to your conversations with Gil in a couple of minutes that you're doing with communities. But what I really want to talk to you about is some of the tweets you've put out recently that I think are really important for our audience around the world to understand. And we have an audience right now in 37 countries listening to this podcast. And so when you talk about the best practices for cities in terms of urban planning, you talk in your tweets about the fact that it's not about money, it's not about technology, it's about political will. Political will is what's necessary. And you felt that Olivia Chow, the mayor of Toronto, is a doer. She just needs some talented planners working with her. But can you talk about the idea of why you boil it down to political will, as though that is the obstacle that we need to address in order to get to the cities that everyone deserves, sustainable cities for all to thrive in?
Yeah, Laura, thanks for inviting me. I think that around the world, specifically in Canada, I think that when we think about it, over the last 50 years, most of the urbanism that we have done is not very good. When we look at the neighborhoods that we have built over the last 50 years, almost all of it is not good for mental health, for physical health, for climate change, for the environment, for economic development, for mobility. I have one of my brothers says that a good city is the one where a child on a tricycle or a person on a wheelchair can safely and joyfully go anywhere. The reality is that almost all of the neighborhoods that we have built in the last 50 years, we cannot even do that simple low-hanging fruit. So that's why I think that we need to do things differently. And sometimes the elected officials anywhere across Canada and in many cities around the world, they say it's an issue of money or it's a technical issue, and it's totally wrong. it's not a technical issue. We have more than enough knowledge to do cities that could be sustainable, equitable, and playful, but we are not doing it. For example, just to billions wasted in the GTA, but this has similar impact in other places in Canada. We have a highway that is elevated by the waterfront called the Gardiner. It's falling apart. To fix it, it was going to cost $500. To tear it down and do a boulevard, it was going to cost $500. But Mayor Tory went away and came back and said, "Oh, I got an idea. Why don't we do a hybrid? 1.8 billion, and actually it's going to cost like 2.5 billion." So for a worst idea, because doing the boulevard, we would have opened up space for 8,000 homes and so on. But there are some things that are so crazy. For example, Premier Ford, he designed and contracted an LRT above ground on Eglinton. Above ground because Eglinton is gigantic. We could have 3 LRTs on Eglinton. One day he woke up last year and said, "Oh, what if the part around my house on it, what if we put it underground? It's going to cost only 2.4 billion with a B, $2.4 billion." I thought thousands of people were going to march in the streets. They were going to think was crazy because, I mean, with 2.4 billion, you can do a lot more kilometers of LRT in the same Etobicoke. You could do houses for the homeless. I mean, you could improve public health. You could improve the schools. But no one said anything. All these advocates. And also amazes me how also the mayors and elected and councillors in all of Ontario said nothing. Well, this is their taxes. So people should be so upset in St. Catharines or Hamilton or Sudbury because it's your taxes that the premier decided to waste 2.4 billion. So I do think that there's lots and lots and lots of money. The issue is not money, and it's about political. It's about having a shared vision. And one of the things that I'm very concerned is that all of the municipalities in the extended GTA, not only Toronto, but also Hamilton and Mississauga and Brampton, and the GTA as a whole, there is no vision. There is no vision. What do we want to be in 2050? What do we want to be in 2040? So we are just doing things like isolated. And for the people listening, a vision is, I say, it's like an image on a puzzle. So we have a shared vision of where is it that we want to go. Then it doesn't really matter which pieces of the puzzle we are doing, as long as they are pieces of the same puzzle. But since we have no idea of the vision, every mayor comes and they do some things, premiers come and do things, but they are pieces of multiple puzzles. So we end up doing like a Frankenstein. So it is very clear that across Canada, we could do cities much more sustainable, equitable, and playful. But we are lacking the political vision and the political guts to do it.
Well said. And I want to get you in a moment to weigh in on Ontario Place, because I just had them on the podcast. And that's another example of Ford spending billions of our dollars on something that I think is ridiculous. But just before you weigh in on that, Gil, I saw in one of your tweets, you talked about Montreal, and I grew up in Montreal, and they're ahead of, the GTA for sure in some aspects, walkable streets, etc. But Paris, you mentioned Paris, and I spent some time in Paris this past summer, and I was blown away by just how consistent the city is, how well planned it is, the idea of a 15-minute city where you can walk. I mean, to me, that, and even getting the water opened up in time for the Olympics. I mean, to me, that is vision, that I'm telling the people, this is what it's going to look like. This is what the benefit is. This is how the puzzle pieces are going to come together. And then actually following through and having the guts, as you say, to make those changes. I mean, in Paris, you wanted to ride a bike or a scooter or walk anywhere. It felt magical almost. And then you come back to North America, to your point, and you're like, what the heck is happening? You can't even ride a bike in Hamilton without a huge semi truck like rumbling right beside you down the street. It's so counterintuitive. So Gil, how is it that cities like Paris, and we're seeing progress in Montreal, how is it that their leaders find the guts? Do they campaign better on their vision? Do they put it as such a priority to have these livable, healthy communities that they're willing to take any kind of political pushback? I mean, why do they have more courage than our mayors and our premier have to make the kind of cities that we need to be successful going forward.
Yeah, I really don't understand what is happening in the extended GTHA, because the reality, I came about 25 years ago, similar time of the amalgamation of Toronto. And we have had such mediocre mayors all across the last 25 years that I fail to understand why. I don't know today one really, really good world-class mayor in any of the more than 20 municipalities in the extended GTA. Not one. How can this happen? I mean, how is it that a city like Calgary, they get Nenshi, a Muslim from Harvard educated, gay, blah, blah, and he was a really good mayor. Montreal keeps getting good mayors. Now the current mayor of Montreal is amazing what she's doing. I mean, Toronto used to be the best city in Canada 30 years ago on everything. Had the best public transit, best parks, almost best education, almost best of everything. And then all of a sudden we have seen how Vancouver went by, and then Montreal went by, and now even Calgary and Edmonton and Halifax and all this. And what is happening with all of us? Things like, for example, the mayor of Paris. People in the GTA say, oh, but we're not Paris. Well, Paris was not Paris either. 5 years ago, you couldn't bike in Paris. It was very dangerous. I biked many times in Paris. It was dangerous. 5 years ago, the mayor, Anne Hidalgo, said, in 5 years, everyone in Paris is going to have a protected bikeway within 1 kilometer. Within 1 kilometer. We are building a network. And she did it. And now you go to Paris and it looks like if you were in Copenhagen or you were in Amsterdam with so many people cycling, because she did it. For example, in Toronto. In Toronto last year, we built 13 kilometers decided by Tory. This year, people said, oh, Mayor Chow, she's a cyclist. Well, we're doing exactly the same 13 kilometers. It doesn't, and then the budget for the next 3 years, it was approved in committee last week. And it was about 30 million per year. What? That is the same as Tory had. Tory was a conservative anti-cyclist, and he got 30 million. And now Olivia Chow is having the same. We should be doing at least 75 to 100 million per year. But it's incredible how also the activists, the advocates, I'm upset with the advocates that are applauding the city. Oh, how nice we're going to do. I said, what do you mean? If this budget was done by Anna Bailao or by Brad Bradford, you would be screaming like crazy saying that this is horrible, whatever. But since it's done by someone called Progressive, Olivia Chow, then you applaud, and then they replied, oh yes, but we are gonna, there was a motion to consider the budget for 2028 to 2030. I said, what? She's not gonna be mayor, or maybe she said re-elected, there might be another council. No. You need to decide is where is the money in the next 3 years when we have this mayor and this council, and it's really shameful. So, I mean, let me give you, Laura, an example of Paris. Paris also 2.5 years ago, they said it's becoming very dangerous to go to the schools by car, because then kids are not walking or cycling because the car drivers are driving like crazy, and it's becoming very dangerous. So then the mayor of Paris said, okay, people, we are going to close the streets in front of the schools. We're going to call them school streets. And there's not going to be any cars between 7 and 4. And then when she started thinking about it, she said, oh, maybe it could be permanent on some of them. Well, Laura, in the last 3 years, she has done 380 schools, 380, and 80% are permanent. And why is it good that it's permanent? Because they plant trees and gardens and flowers. So now all of a sudden, so we need to decide, all of these things are good for everything. So you need to pick. The people in Paris are very environmentally and they like green. So she said, we're going to do it because we're creating a green city, and they put in all of these trees. 380 schools. Why is it that we don't do it anywhere in the extended GTHA? It's really shameful. Yeah. In London, the mayor of London, same program, school streets, but what is the benefit? In London, they are concerned about the quality of the air. So he said, when the cars drop kids off, they poison the air that is near the classrooms or the entrance of the drop-off area for the next 2 hours and 15 minutes. So we cannot have cars there. So he has done over 400 schools. but then there the school streets is because of quality of air. So you can do it for the trees or for the quality of the air or for economic development or just for fun, and it could be amazing. So they are doing it. And I know how much does it cost? Almost nothing. You can just put some bollards and shut it down and do it. You could have school guards saying, and we could even do pilots, say, okay, let's do 20 schools in Toronto or in Mississauga or in Hamilton or whatever, or in Vancouver or Calgary or Edmonton. By the way, these things have nothing to do because now that your podcast goes all across Canada, this is equally applicable to small cities or large ones, to wealthy ones or poor ones. This has nothing to do, but kids should be able to walk around. Also, when the kids come out of school at 3 p.m., now they got these wonderful areas where they can stay and play. And also the community has these areas on Saturdays and Sundays and holidays. So it's not about the money. For example, the mayor of London saw that the kids in London are not physically active like the kids in Canada. So he said, okay, we are going to create the Daily Mile. What is the Daily Mile? They had a 15-minute recess in the morning in the schools. So he increased it to 25 minutes. So in those 25 minutes, every single school in London, the kids run for a mile, run or walk, whatever they can do. And the mayor goes once a week. He shows up in a different school with a professional soccer player or an actor or an actress, someone to highlight. Because we need, part of it is infrastructure, but part of it is programs, is hardware and software. So that's why I say doing protected bike lanes is nothing. I mean, with a fraction of the money that we are wasting in the Gardiner or that we are wasting in Eglinton or in Ontario Place, we could do all of the bike lanes that are needed in all of the extended GTHA, all of them. We could have an amazing. So when people say it's about the money, it has nothing to do with the money. So also getting people to be active.
Gil, when I go into Toronto and I drive and I'd be stuck on, I think it was Richmond, trying to get to News Talk 1010 in the morning, and all the bikes were going way faster and passing, right? I mean, it's a protected bike lane down that street, and you can see how much sense it makes. But I mean, you're talking about helping kids, helping the environment, helping the air. In Paris, when they switched up license plates, you could drive your car if you had certain letters on your license plate one day and not the next, to try to cut down on congestion. These are all common sense ideas. They don't, as you say, require technology and a ton of money. But I just they require political will and guts, right? And not being so afraid of people who are going to say, oh, but it's a war on the car, or whatever other nonsense we're hearing in the discussion here in the GTHA. But I want to get to Olivia Chow, because you did say that she is a doer, and you did say she needs a planner, and you put out a couple of names, Kismet, Toderin, or Thorne, who used to be here in Hamilton, as good urban planners that can get in there and make things happen with her. But I mean, I want your opinion on what happened with Ontario Place. She did get money from Premier Ford, right? She got money from Premier Ford for homelessness, which I applaud her for, but also made it easier for him to do this billion-dollar destroying of Ontario Place to create some sort of a private spa that I don't think anybody wants in a secret deal. So, I mean, the money is there if he can spend it on an underwater parking garage, Gil. It's that the priorities are not for the vision that you're laying out. Or what do you think about Ontario Place?
Well, I think that first, always, all my life, my loyalty is to the citizens, is to the community, not to politicians. I did support Olivia Chow because I think she's a good person. I think she's honest and she has good intentions. But there are some issues where she has got done really bad. For example, she has really had impact for life for our waterfront. There have been two huge issues that will be there for hundreds of years. One is Ontario Place. Ontario Place, she knew that 80% of the land was owned by Ontario. Everybody knew. Nevertheless, on campaign, she always said that it should be a park, a waterfront public park where anybody could go in and blah, blah. Then when she negotiated with Ford about taking up the highways, she also negotiated Ontario Place, and then she said, well, the province could do anything they want to. Well, but she knew that when she was on campaign. So why is it that during campaign she said that she was going to oppose it and that she was, I mean, and besides, it has nothing to do with who owns it. Because this is not an owner, this is not a legal issue, it's a political issue. Olivia Chow could have made this a hot potato, a political issue. And also every single person in Toronto is also an Ontarian. So 40%, $4 out of $10 that the province gets are money from Torontonians. So this should have been made a political issue, and then Ford would have reacted differently. It had nothing to do with legal. But besides anything legal, she knew also during the campaign. The issue of the gardener, the same thing. She knew what were the stakes. So I do think that at some point you cannot sell your soul. I think that I applaud her for going and negotiating and getting some funding for the city. But like Ontario Place had nothing to do with the negotiations, so I don't know why she gave it in. And I think that our waterfront is going to be very different, especially because I have no doubts that is not going to be a waterfront spa. That is going to be a casino. And Doug Ford has always wanted a casino. I mean, this building, Laura, is the size of the BMO Stadium. It's gigantic. It's the size of the BMO Stadium. Anyway you do the numbers, a spa cannot make up enough money to maintain that. It's going to be also horrible for the environment, because imagine heating up that gigantic building. Also, that should have been public space. But I come back to where I started with the vision. There is no vision. So we had no vision. So when Ford came out and said, oh, we're going to do a waterfront spa, there were no alternatives. No one had done anything. So I blame also Kathleen Wynne. I blamed McGuinty, because they did no vision. There was no vision. If there had been a shared vision, and when Doug Ford said that, everybody would say, oh, no, wait a minute. We already have a vision that we're going to have a waterfront, even if we don't do it, but there was not. Like there is not a vision also like on the Island Airport. There is no vision on the Gardiner. So then each mayor, each premier comes us and does things, and no one opposes. Like the biggest opposition to Ontario Place is that, oh, when I was a little kid, I used to go, who cares? We cannot justify Ontario Place based on what it was 50 years ago, but on the potential what it could be 50 years from now. Also, we need to remember that half of the population that live in the GTHA, we were born in another country. And the possibility for the future is really amazing. I really think it's absolutely horrible to take down all of those trees, and to, instead of having a public waterfront park, to have that grotesque, that also is costing billions. It's also, I mean, it's not about a spa. Do you think, Laura, that the Premier Ford was going to sole source this and hand it to one? And on top of that, investor like $1 billion doing a parking lot and cleaning up the space and doing all of this.
Gil, I've been calling it a spacino since the beginning, right? It's always been about a casino. But let me just ask you this then, because I don't travel nearly as much as you have, but I have been to a few places around the world, and I always fly back here and I feel depressed. It's grim. It's grim to see Toronto after you've been other places. There seems to be no imagination. Things seem to be piecemeal all over the place. And when you mention how diverse the city is, and its potential, you know, all of those cultures coming together could bring so many better practices to Toronto that I get very frustrated. I get extremely frustrated with the state of Hamilton. And as you mentioned, all the other cities, it's as though they don't even travel, these mayors, or they're so afraid of being reelected that they constantly hold us back. There's an expression one councillor used in Hamilton, Gil, where she said, Hamilton is managing our decline, right? Managing our decline as opposed to building for the future. So let me just end on this, Gil, and then I'll mention the conversations that communities can have with you as part of you giving back. How do you stay so hopeful when, as you said, when the Eglinton plan changed, there should have been people in the streets? And when I think of Paris, people get in the streets every time they get angry, right? Is it that as a population, we are enabling these politicians to be managing our decline, to be mediocre, to not sell us a vision, but just to, you know, in the case of the premier, give us booze in corner stores, and we're suddenly going to not care about anything else he does with our money, or get these mayors in because of name recognition and not care about any vision. Like Mayor Andrea Horvath ran on platitudes and zero vision, Gil, and I would not vote for her because of that. And she only won by 1% with all of her past name recognition, but she still won. And the results have been mediocre as I worried. So is it our fault as people? You put the citizens first. Is it us as citizens who are
Yes.
not as good as global citizens seem to be about moving their cities forward?
Yeah, I do think that it's about citizens. I think that we need to show up. Show up. For example, people say, oh, we have too many NIMBYs. We don't have too many NIMBYs. The NIMBYs are 3 or 4 or 5 idiots that have a loud mouth. When you go to the, and that's now what they do for life. So most of these NIMBYs, as I mentioned, 3 or 4, they have retired, and all of a sudden they found a job that they self-proclaim themselves the community. So then they go to public
They have the
meetings.
raison d'etre now, right? They're
Yeah,
to oppose. Yeah.
they go to public meetings, and then they meet their friends because it's the same people going to all the meetings, whether it's for parks or for trees or Ontario Place or bike lanes or whatever, the same. And then they chat, and then they do these speeches. Oh, I'm here on behalf of the community. Yeah. Who appointed you? Who elected you? What gives you the right to say you're on behalf of the community? But then the media, you get the Toronto Star and goes and has 6-column articles saying community opposes whatever park. I said, why the community? And then they have this half-page picture. So these people, they love going against things because they gotta have a page. They got a full-page article with a quarter. No. So citizens, we need to show up. We need to show up because sometimes we say, oh, there's going to be... The problem with also citizen engagement is that it's very poorly done. We are doing it in the wrong place. Also, we go to public meetings and we do what the people in the meetings say. No. We should tell them that that is one source. But sometimes we have public meetings with 10 people and the cities make decisions of millions and millions of dollars based on that, instead of saying, no, this is one source of information, but we also have knowledge and experience. But also we should do meetings in different places at different times and also virtual so that more and more people. But citizens need to show up, because if we don't show up, then these NIMBYs are going to get the power. They're getting a lot of power. It's not because they are many.
Right.
It's because they show up and they're very loud.
Well,
If we had a counter movement to show up, for whatever, for the trees. For example, we have here, I live in the Junction.
Yeah.
The city right now is tearing apart all of the sidewalks and rebuilding. They are in good shape, and we are tearing them down to build new ones. When in Toronto, 1 out of 4 streets does not have a sidewalk. I mean, I love Toronto, but I'm so sad and get upset because the most shameful data about Toronto is that 1 out of 4 streets doesn't have a sidewalk. A sidewalk is almost like a human rights issue. Why are we tearing apart these ones in the Junction that are in good shape instead of putting the money in the others? Why? Because John Tory gave the power to the councilors that any ward councilor can veto doing sidewalks. So we are not doing sidewalks, a human rights issue, because any councilor can oppose it. Okay, where is Olivia Chow? Where is the budget for sidewalks? We have 17,000 millions, $17 billion. Like when I was talking about saying that we should be investing 75 to $100 million, I'm talking less than 0.5%. We have 17,000 millions, and I'm saying let's do 100 million. They are putting 30, which is nothing. Where is the budget for sidewalks? 1 out of 4 streets doesn't have sidewalk on either side. Why are we not doing sidewalks out of that budget? So it's things that really make a lot of sense. The trees. Yeah. Why are we planting so many trees in the wealthy areas? We have a 28% tree canopy. Yeah, but where the wealthy people live is 50%, where the low income live is less than 10%. I mean, but also this is across Canada. So I love that you used to be in the GTHA, but now you are across Canada, because every topic that you mentioned, it really has an impact directly or indirectly across Canada.
Well, that's why we took the Oshow National, because all the issues are the same. I'd hear from people all across, from Vancouver, from Hamilton, from across Ontario, and they had dealing with homelessness, dealing with urban planning, dealing with climate mitigation. They're all the same issues, right? So it's like, well, why are we not having a national conversation? And as I mentioned, 20 days into doing this nationally, we're in 37 countries now, because around the world, people are facing the same challenges, as you know from your travels. Just a couple quick points, and then I got to wrap us up here, Gil. I love your passion. I think you're going to run for mayor of Toronto again. I don't hear you stepping out entirely. But the green belt, right? People showed up for the green belt in huge numbers. They showed up on the sides of streets. They showed up at city halls and marches. And when the Ford went to his little hot dog fest, they showed up to block his motorcade, to show him that they were disgusted by the scandal and by the $8 billion going to pals, right? That we stood up and slowed that down, didn't stop it. And I'm having other conversations with environmentalists on how the fight continues. But to me, that gave me some hope that the people of Ontario can get off their butts when they need to. And I'm really hoping on these issues, like you mentioned, they don't just let a couple loud voices who have nothing better to do than show up at these meetings and get in the paper, that they actually realize that this is our future for our kids and our families and our environment, right? And our money that is slushing around and going to these ridiculous projects, often ones that I think are steeped in corruption. So Gil, I appreciate your passion. And I just want people listening who are excited by what you're saying and want to hear more. Gil is doing something now called Conversations with Gil, where if you have enough people, he will come and speak for free so that your community can understand how to do better cities, can understand the 8 to 80 principle that Gil founded. So Gil, did you want to just do a final little bit on that before I let you go, so people can, we can continue this conversation in those other areas?
Yeah, I think that about raising the level of the conversation. By the way, I'm so hopeful because of what has happened in Ontario Place and also in the Greenbelt.
Right.
Finally, citizens are waking up. I thought that maybe everybody in the GTHA had honey running through their veins instead of blood, because they just didn't act. People were not showing up. People who were politically correct and not saying anything. But also we need to be better communicators, because people don't understand, for example, the Highway 413, how horrible it can be, because it's not the highway. In addition of the highway is that all of the land between the green belt limit that we have today and that highway is going to be urbanized. So today they're just saying about the highway, but then a few years from now they're going to say, well, now that we have the highway, we have a housing crisis, let's fill that up, and that will be the biggest sprawl, the biggest environmental impact that the world has ever seen on sprawl. So this will be absolutely terrible, not for the highway, but for the sprawl. And also then, as a way of give back, every other week I do a webinar, every other Tuesday at 11. It's always free, and I have always people from over 30 countries, more than 700 registered. And I said, okay, but I also chose to live in the GTHA, so I want to give back. So I'm doing something that I call Conversations with Gil, and I talk about how to create equitable, sustainable, and playful cities. So the only thing that I ask is, one, that it has to be 2 hours. 2, that the host has to have 50 or more people, can be 50, 500, 1,000, it doesn't matter. And 3, they put the venue, and then I go and do everything for free. I mean, they've hired me all over the world. Like when I'm talking about more than 350 cities, like last week I was working in Bratislava, the capital of Slovenia, and then I work in Prague, and then I work in Vienna. The week before I was working in Madrid. In next week I go to Chile, the following week to Brazil. But I want to in the GTHA. So if anybody, I've done secondary schools, I've done universities. Yesterday I was in St. Catharines, that one counselor loved the idea and she set it up. And by the way, this has nothing to do with political parties. Everything that Laura and I have spoken today is not left or right, it's not liberal or NDP or conservative, has nothing to do. We should actually come to an agreement on these issues, regarding on the what. We need to have networks of protected violence. We need parks, we need trees, we need older people. It's 1/3 of our life as elders to live healthier and happier. We need the children. Everything the what should be, we should come to an agreement on the what. Maybe the how is different. Maybe the NDP plants trees with unionized workers. Maybe the liberals outsource to the private sector. But that's the how. But I do think that we should come to develop a shared vision of our cities, of our area, but also to have an agreement on the what. We are the fastest growing region in the developed world. They are in emerging countries in Africa and India are growing faster. But in the developed, quote unquote, developed world, the GTHA is the fastest growing. It's incredible that within the next 30 years, it's going to grow by more than 50%. And we don't have a vision of how do we want to live. Just one last example, Laura. All over Ontario, McGuinty, then Kathleen Wynne, and now Ford are amalgamating schools all over the place. So it's horrible because now they said, oh, well, instead of 3 principals, we have 1. Yes, but instead of having walk to schools, now we have drive to schools. The kids make friends, and now I've gone to small communities in Northern Ontario that they had only 3 elementary schools. All of them were walk to schools. Now they have a gigantic, a mega elementary school where all the kids have to be driven. They make friends, and now they have to be driven to their friend's house. That is horrible. We know that is bad. The saving of 1 principal doesn't justify. So I do think that we need to change, and hopefully another day we'll talk about schools, because I think the schools should become the heart of the neighborhoods. The heart. The school should be, every neighborhood in Canada has a school. What if those schools were turned into a community center? Where we would host, we would have the farmers markets and dances, and we would have the outdoor places would be public parks, and we would open up the gymnasiums in the evenings, Saturdays, Sundays. We could have just 3 classrooms open so people could do Tai Chi or yoga, or it could be so simple, very little money, and it would transform the life of every single neighborhood in Canada.
I'll have you back on about that, because in the schools, they have industrial kitchens that sit empty where the kids could be learning how to cook for homeless neighbors, right? I mean, the amount of how we underuse our schools and how dangerous our schools have become as these mega schools, we could do a whole show on that. I'm going to have you back, Gil Penalosa, because we could have done another hour. Thank you so much. And I'm also going to make sure that some Hamilton counselors who are urbanists know about your conversations with Gil, and see if we can't get you in our town, because we desperately need to hear from you directly and in person. And I encourage
10 seconds. You mentioned that if I was going to run for mayor. No, I'm not going to run for anything. I'm not running for it, but I'm happy to help any mayor who wants to do things from the center, from the left, from the right. That has nothing to do. If there is any mayor at city council anywhere in the extended GTA that wants to do things, I'm really, really, really happy to help. But me running, no, that was once in a lifetime. There were things that no one was willing to run because Tory had too much money and too much power. Well, elections is not only about winning in votes, but in 100 days, I got 100,000 votes. So maybe some people were interested, but no, I will not be running, but I will be very happy to help people anywhere.
Well, I love that. And you give me hope, Gil. I get frustrated with all the good ideas you have that other cities are doing that we're so far from. But you give me hope that if the people, the citizens get engaged, we can see change and we can push it and get some political courage from our leaders. So thank you so much for being on the Oshow, Gil Penalosa. I promise we will have you back. And I can't wait to hear from our audience in Canada and around the world what they thought about your comments and your ideas. Thank you so much.
You give me so much hope, because also you speak up. Citizens, we need to speak up. When people say, oh, we're politically correct. No, we should not be political. We should be respectful like Laura. Laura is respectful, but not politically correct. Please, people, we will be better if we speak up. So thank you for speaking up and doing this magnificent program.
Oh, thank you. Well, you know what? Thank you for being a part of it. I can't do it without great guests and listeners and producers and viewers out there. But most importantly, I agree with you. We all have to speak up. It's our country. It's our money. It's our future. It's our families. If we're not fighting for better when we know there's better out there, then we're stuck with what we get. And I just wish people understood that and got out there and voted and spoke up. Thanks so much, Gil. We'll have you back on. And thank you, everyone, for watching and listening to The Oshow.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the Oshow. It's the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. With a lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on the Oshow. There's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the Oshow. Stand for something or fall for it all. Ontario, hear the call on the Oshow. It's a podcast, the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. Stay informed with the Oshow.
Your merch bin.